Ysaye's pretty specific about when he wants time to be taken. When I was at the Sendai competition, I played Ysaye 5, and I personally kind of like to take more time at the beginning because it's titled The Dawn, and you feel that everything is unfolding very gradually and slowly. But I talked to Mr. Ashkenazi, who was on the jury after I played. He didn't understand why everybody was going so slow and being so indulgent on the first few notes, because that opening just kind of unfolds very slowly. And actually, I played for a lot of people before I went to Sendai. Everyone said to take as much time as I wanted and to really let it unfold gradually, which I personally musically agree with. But I totally understand Mr. Ashkenazi's point too, because I doesn't say to take any time, and he was frustrated that people were just being so extravagant with the beginning. I think Mr. Ashkenazi is always very faithful to what's on the page. I think that if you're preparing for a competition, maybe it's safest to do what feels organic and matches what you see on the page. Because I think Ysaye, being a violinist too, he knew what he was doing. When he wants time taken, he's pretty specific about saying when that timing is. I think that a lot of it is flexible, but within reason.
I just came off of performing the Ysaye second violin sonata, and there are a couple moments there where you can play around with timing, but it is actually pretty much straight. There are some big beat structures in the variations movement, the middle movement, and so there's a lot of rubato timing you can do there. And then with the nature of the first and last movements, with these quick runs and then these quick pauses, you can really play around with the amount of timing you take to make a certain pause more dramatic, or if you want to just go on right to the next part. So I do think that there is a little bit of freedom there, but I think generally, yeah, I agree. Ysaye, he was a very smart man and a great violinist, and he would definitely write in the timings if he wanted.
In terms of Ysaye 3, none of Ysaye's caprices are inherently showpieces. I feel that they're musically deep in a way that most showpieces are not. Often, especially, Ysaye 3 gets played in a way that's extremely virtuosic and people play it as fast as possible. And I think that actually a lot of the virtuosity and intensity is lost when things go by too quickly. I remember Mrs. Vamos was always very adamant about the ending of Ysaye 3 not just taking off and going into the abyss and accelerating past the point of reason. Playing it a bit slower gives every note a little bit more gravity, and it makes the whole piece feel heavier and more impactful, I find. And I think that in general, Ysaye, being musically complex and deeply introspective music, you're served well by letting the music be inevitable rather than trying to force the music into motion, because I think Ysaye is so smart with the way that he structures everything. With all of his runs and everything, he creates a sense of musical motion if you follow what the page says. So certain music, I think, really does take you moving to give it life, but I think Ysaye is maybe on the other end of that spectrum, where too much time manipulation really takes away from what his music is trying to do.
I didn't think about how great of a thinker Ysaye was when I was just performing the Ysaye recently, but if I think about it more, he really was a genius, because he was one of few composers that wrote 6 solo sonatas for the violin that are lasting, and people play them every day in concert in solo recitals. Same with the Bach sonatas. If you think of other great composers, I can't think of another composer besides Bach and Ysaye that wrote such lasting masterworks for solo violin. Even someone like Beethoven didn't write for solo violin, or Mozart even. I mean, they wrote sonatas and tons of operas, but they didn't understand the violin in the way that Bach or Ysaye did, I wouldn't imagine. Or if they did, they should have written something for the solo violin in that contrapuntal manner. I think it's amazing what Ysaye is able to create in all of his sonatas, because all 6 of them are vastly different, of course. I love what you said about not taking the ending of Ysaye 3 too fast, because just the fact that Ysaye is so intentional and he's so smart, he really knows what he's doing, and of course he was an an amazing violinist. I think he's the type of person that can do anything. He doesn't really need to prove that he's a great violinist. I think he's gotten past that point. It's already kind of a given that he plays the violin very well, and I think that through the technique you're trying to express something deeper rather than just having the technique be the expression.
I remember reading Ysaye saying that he wanted each one of his sonatas to push the boundaries of the violin even further, to introduce new things for the violin, and to push classical music into a new direction. I think that's so cool because that goes along with the tradition of Paganini and Ernst, and of course then Ysaye. It's so inspiring when people who really understand the violin and its capabilities write for the violin, because it's just like Rachmaninoff writing for the piano. When there's somebody who understands the mechanics of an instrument so intimately well, you can do things that work so well for the hand, that are musically complex and fulfilling, and feel comfortable for a violinist to play, albeit challenging, but comfortable and possible. Versus there are a lot of composers out there who are tremendous composers, very musical, but not having an intimate knowledge of the violin. It becomes very difficult to actually write for the solo violin when you're working with one instrument and trying to get things to sound a certain way. I find that a lot of the time for contemporary composers, when I look at these solo violin works, things are incredibly difficult and they don't sound very impressive, or I'm not even sure what the effect is that the composer is trying to achieve, or the effect that the composer is trying to achieve could be done in a much more simple way, doing some much more simple technique. Ysaye never makes anything unnecessarily difficult. Everything has intention and purpose. It fits the hand incredibly well. Ysaye always looks really difficult, but once you understand the hand structure and everything, it's the work of a genius. I really feel every single sonata I've played of Ysaye, I'm always impressed by how well things fit the hand.
Yeah, I just am in awe of what Ysaye has created, and of course we talked about Bach as being sort of the Bible. I think in terms of solo violin repertoire, Bach and Ysaye go hand in hand.